My partner sold me out for a promotion. Years later, he walked into my office as the new hire, and HR announced he'd be working under me. That's when everything changed. You ever think back to a time in your life and realize there was a clear before and after moment? For me, it was the Henderson account. Sounds boring, right? Just another corporate project with endless meetings and too much coffee. But that account changed everything. My career, my friendships, and the way I see people. At the time, I was still finding my footing in the company. Not the new guy anymore, but not exactly someone whose name carried weight. Then there was Brad. Brad came in around the same time I did, and we just clicked. He was the kind of guy you could pull an all-nighter with, throwing ideas back and forth until your brains felt fried. We had this unspoken rule. No matter who pitched the idea, we both got the credit. It was our work, our win. The Henderson account was a big deal, make or break territory. The client was huge, the budget even bigger, and the pressure was enough to make seasoned managers sweat. Brad and I practically lived at the office for months, building strategies, running numbers, crafting presentations that made even the higher-ups nod in approval. We kept each other sane with late-night takeout and sarcastic jokes about how this was all going to kill us before 35. Looking back, those months felt like one long blur of fluorescent lights and caffeine. I trusted him completely. When he said, "I've got this part handled," I believed him. When I asked him to double-check my numbers, he caught mistakes I had missed. We were in sync, the way good partners are. The day of the final presentation, we nailed it. The client was sold, our boss was grinning, and Brad and I exchanged that look. The silent victory high five you give when words are too small for the moment. I thought we had just set ourselves up for something huge. And in a way, we had. Only, I was not ready for the twist that came next. Because 3 days later, I walked into a meeting that would knock the wind right out of me and make me realize I had been playing on a team of one all along. It was a Monday morning, one of those gray, rainy ones where even the coffee tastes tired. I had just dropped my coat on my chair when my boss, Claire, popped her head into my cubicle and said, "Big news in the conference room." No hint, no smile, just that flat tone she used when something serious was happening. I figured maybe we had landed another big client, or someone from corporate was visiting. I grabbed my notebook, strolled down the hall, and pushed the door open. Inside, the whole leadership team was there. Suits, polished shoes, folders stacked neatly on the table. Brad was at the head of the room. That alone should have tipped me off. Claire cleared her throat and launched into this speech about outstanding performance and innovative thinking that had not only secured the Henderson deal, but impressed the board enough to fast-track someone for a senior role. And then she turned to Brad. She handed him a shiny, embossed folder and announced he was being promoted, senior project manager, effective immediately. Applause filled the room. I clapped too, out of reflex, but my brain was scrambling to catch up. Brad was grinning, shaking hands, thanking everyone. He told them about the late nights he had spent perfecting the pitch and how much the client loved his personal approach. Every I in that speech felt like a knife in my ribs. There was no we, no mention of me. It was as if I had been a ghost in my own project. When the meeting wrapped up, people were patting him on the back, already talking about the new accounts he would lead. I just sat there, my notebook still open to a blank page, wondering if I had imagined the last 6 months. Brad caught my eye on his way out. For a split second, I thought maybe he would acknowledge me, maybe throw me a nod or a quiet, "We'll talk later." Instead, he gave me that same smile he had given the client the day we landed the account. Polished, controlled, almost rehearsed. That was the moment I knew whatever friendship I thought we had was dead. But what I did not know yet was how fast the fallout would hit me and how far I was about to fall. The fallout did not come with fireworks. It crept in, quiet at first, small things that were easy to brush off if I wanted to. Emails I should have been copied on suddenly skipped my inbox. Meetings I had been invited to every week were now streamlined to include only essential personnel. Projects I had been lined up for were reassigned to other teams. And Brad, he barely spoke to me unless it was in passing, and even then it was the kind of polite nod you give a stranger in an elevator. A week after his promotion, Claire called me into her office. She smiled that managerial smile that hides bad news under a layer of "this is for the best." She told me my role was being restructured, and I would be moving to a smaller account in a different department. "It will give you a chance to develop independently," she said. like I was some fresh out of college intern instead of the guy who had just carried half the Henderson account on his back. I wanted to argue, to lay out the hours I had worked, the ideas I had contributed, the very slide decks Brad had presented as his own. But the words never made it past my teeth. I just nodded, numb, and left her office with that sinking feeling in my gut, the kind you get when you know the verdict has already been decided. The new department was different. Smaller budgets, smaller clients, and a cramped office with a view of the parking lot. I went from high-stakes deals and strategy sessions to handling minor requests for mid-tier accounts that barely covered my salary. Meanwhile, I watched Brad's name pop up in company emails almost daily, new deals closed, awards won, his face in glossy photos from industry events. It was like watching someone else live the life you had been building for yourself. At night, I would lie in bed replaying the months before the Henderson deal, the brainstorming sessions, the mutual "we're in this together" speeches. I kept trying to pinpoint the moment when he decided to cut me out, but there was no obvious sign. No fight. No warning. Just a clean break, like it had been planned from the start. Within 6 months, I stopped trying to climb back up. I started looking for a way out entirely. I told myself I was just chasing a fresh start. But the truth was, I could not stand walking past Brad's office every day, hearing his laugh from down the hall, knowing the person who had wrecked my career was still thriving in the spot that should have been ours. And one rainy Thursday afternoon, that fresh start walked right through the lobby doors. That Thursday was supposed to be just another blur of small-time client calls and lukewarm coffee. I was half listening to a conference line when I caught sight of a woman in a dark green coat stepping into the lobby. She had that purposeful walk, the kind that says she knows exactly why she is there and will not be leaving until she gets it. Her name was Dana, and I remembered it instantly because she had been a recruiter who had reached out to me about a position almost a year earlier. Back then, I had politely passed. The role was at a much smaller firm, and I still believed my best shot at moving up was where I was. That belief had died the day Brad gave his I speech. Dana caught sight of me through the glass wall and waved. She was not there for me, at least not officially. She had a meeting with someone in another department, but she asked if I had a minute to talk. We ducked into the little cafe on the ground floor, the one nobody used unless they were desperate enough to risk the bitter espresso. She got straight to the point. The position she had pitched me before was still open. The company had held off on filling it because they wanted the right person. It is smaller, she admitted, but they are building something. You would have room to actually lead, not just execute someone else's ideas. I almost laughed. After months of being sidelined, the idea of having any say in anything felt like a fantasy. But then she mentioned one detail that caught me off guard. They had just landed a major client. Not quite Henderson level, but big enough to turn heads in the industry. And they needed someone who could run with it. 2 weeks later, I was gone. No dramatic farewell speech, no lingering goodbyes. I turned in my badge, cleared out my desk, and walked out without once glancing toward Brad's corner office. The new job was a shock to the system. Smaller team, leaner resources, no cushion for mistakes. But it was mine. Every pitch, every win, every client relationship, I built it from the ground up. Months turned into years. The company grew. I grew. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about Brad. He became a name I used to know, a closed chapter. Until one morning, I opened my calendar for the week and saw a new hire orientation scheduled for Friday. The name in the invite made my stomach drop. It was Brad. Friday morning came with the same hum of printers, clack of keyboards, and smell of burnt toast from the break room toaster. But under it, I could feel that thrum of anticipation you get when you know something is about to shift. The new hire orientation was held in the small glass-walled conference room just off the main floor. From my desk, I could see the chairs lined up, the welcome packets neatly stacked, the company logo looping on the TV. I told myself I would keep it professional. Just shake his hand, say welcome aboard, and move on. We were different people now, different paths. Then the door opened, and there he was. Brad. Same easy smile, same neatly combed hair, but there was something different in the eyes. A little less shine, maybe. He scanned the room, his gaze snagging on me for just a second before he quickly looked away. Our HR manager, oblivious to the history, made the introductions. Brad's joining us as an account manager. He'll be reporting directly to. And then her eyes flicked to me. You. The look on his face was worth every late night I had ever worked without credit. It was just a flicker, but I saw it. Shock, confusion, and maybe the start of dread. I kept my voice even. Glad to have you on board. My handshake was firm, steady. Not a word about the past. Over the next hour, I walked him and the other new hires through the basics, systems, processes, expectations. I saw him scribble notes, not along, but he kept glancing at me like he was trying to figure out the ground rules. When the meeting ended, the others filtered out, leaving the two of us standing in that quiet, air-conditioned stillness. He cleared his throat, like he might try to bring up the old days. I did not give him the chance. Brad, I said, I run a tight team. We measure success here by results, not speeches. Everyone pulls their weight. Everyone gets credit. That is how we do it. No anger. No edge. Just facts. He nodded slowly, but I could see the memory flicker in his eyes. The memory of a time when everyone had meant just him. Walking back to my office, I could not help but think how strange life is. Years ago, I had been the one blindsided in a meeting. Now I was the one holding the pen, writing the playbook he would have to follow. What I did not know yet was that the real test of control was coming sooner than I thought. It happened quicker than I expected. 2 weeks after Brad joined, one of our senior account leads went on unexpected medical leave, and their biggest client landed in my lap. It was a high-visibility project, the kind of thing that could make or break a quarter. I needed someone to help run point on the day-to-day. The logical choice was Brad. When I told him, I kept it simple. You'll handle client communication, timelines, and deliverables. I'll handle the strategy and approvals. I watched his reaction closely. He hesitated just long enough for me to know he understood the weight of it. He would be in the trenches, but I would be the one steering the ship. The first few days were almost normal. He showed up early, followed instructions, kept me updated. If there was tension under the surface, he kept it buried. But I noticed things, how his emails to clients had a little too much flourish, how he tried to drop my name less and his own more, how he always lingered just a second too long before forwarding my directives to the rest of the team. I let it slide. For now, midway through the project, the client requested an urgent change to the campaign. Tight deadline, zero room for error. Brad volunteered to draft the new pitch deck. I agreed, but made it clear I wanted to review it before it went out. The next morning, I got an email from the client, thanking Brad and his team for the quick turnaround. My stomach sank. He had sent it without my approval. Worse, the deck was good, very good. It was the kind of work that could easily put him back in the spotlight if I handled it wrong. I called him into my office. No raised voice, no anger, just calm. Brad, we have a process here. Everything goes through me before it hits a client. That's not optional. He opened his mouth, probably to charm his way out, but I cut him off. You did solid work. I'll make sure the client knows it was part of the team's effort. That's how we operate here. Understood? Something flickered in his eyes, frustration, maybe even regret, but he nodded. Understood. As he left, I realized I was walking a fine line. This was not about revenge. It was about control, about making sure he understood that the rules now worked both ways. And just when I thought I had the balance right, an unexpected twist threatened to throw the whole thing off. The twist came in the form of an email from our CEO late on a Tuesday night. One of our biggest prospective clients, bigger than anything I had handled here, wanted to meet in person to discuss a long-term partnership. It was a massive opportunity, and apparently, they had requested Brad be part of the pitch team. I stared at the screen for a long minute, wondering if this was coincidence or if Brad had somehow planted that seed. Either way, it meant we would be side by side again, only this time in front of the kind of client that could shift the entire company's trajectory. In the prep meetings, Brad slipped into his old habits, talking just a little too long, steering ideas toward himself, polishing his role until it looked like he was running the show. The team noticed, but no one said anything. They did not know the history. I let him keep talking. I even let him lead a few sections of the practice pitch. Then, 2 days before the meeting, I called him into my office. I want you to open, I told him. Set the tone, warm the room up. But the strategic proposal, that comes from me. No improvising. He hesitated, eyes narrowing just a touch. Got it. The day of the pitch, the client's conference room was sleek and intimidating. Glass walls, chrome accents, a view of the skyline that could make you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. Brad started strong, charming them, building rapport. When it was my turn, I stepped in with the strategy we had refined, hitting them with clear numbers, timelines, and outcomes. By the end, the client's lead decision-maker smiled and said, "This is exactly the partnership we've been looking for." On the way back to the office, Brad was quiet. I think he realized what had just happened. He had played his part well, but I had steered the win, and everyone in the room had seen it. That night, I got a short message from him. "Good work today." It was the first time in years I had heard those words from him, but it did not erase what had happened in the past. And it definitely did not prepare me for what was about to land on my desk the following week. The thing on my desk was a printed email chain from one of our junior analysts, Jenna. She had flagged it for me with a sticky note that just said, "Thought you should see this." It was between Brad and the client we had just landed. He had been reaching out separately, without looping me in, pitching additional services we could provide, services that were not in our scope, not approved, and in some cases, not even offered by our company. He was framing them as ideas he had been developing personally, using phrases like "my team" and "my strategy." I read the thread twice, slow, making sure I was not overreacting. This was not harmless enthusiasm. This was the same move he had pulled back on the Henderson account. Only now it was under my leadership. I called him into my office. He came in wearing that casual confidence, probably expecting another routine check-in. I slid the printed email across the desk. His face shifted, just a fraction, but enough. "I was just trying to strengthen the relationship," he said. "That is not how we strengthen relationships here," I replied. My voice was steady, almost quiet. "Here, we win as a team. You break that, you break everything." He leaned back, trying to keep his composure, but I could see the gears turning. How much could he push? How far could he bend without snapping the rope? "I am not going to put this on your record," I told him. "But from this moment forward, every communication with this client goes through me. Every idea gets vetted. If you have a problem with that, tell me now." He looked at me for a long second, and for once, he had nothing to say. As he left, I realized something had shifted. The man who had once walked into a boardroom and erased me from my own work was now sitting across from me, being told where the lines were, and knowing I was the one drawing them. But I also knew Brad. This was not over. The next move was his, and if history had taught me anything, it would not be clean. And I was right. It happened about a month later. We were in the final stretch of another high-profile campaign when I noticed something odd in the project tracker. Deadlines moved, tasks reassigned, and my name suddenly missing from key deliverables. I dug deeper. Buried in the shared drive was a separate folder, labeled in a way only someone on the inside would understand. Inside were files, pitch decks, proposals, budget outlines, all branded with our client's logo, but with no mention of our company anywhere. Brad had been building a shadow version of the project, cutting me and the team out entirely. I sat back in my chair, feeling that same cold drop in my stomach I had felt years ago in that conference room. Only this time, I was not blindsided. I had the full picture and the authority to do something about it. I pulled every file, every email, every timestamp. By the next morning, I had a clean, chronological record. Then I called HR and legal into my office. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts. By the afternoon, Brad was sitting across from me again, this time with an HR rep beside him. He tried to spin it, claiming he was exploring concepts to bring more value to the client. But the paper trail was airtight. Unauthorized work, potential breach of contract, a risk to the company's reputation. I let HR handle the formalities. My only contribution was at the end, when Brad stood to leave, eyes hard but voice low. "You could have just talked to me," he said. I met his gaze. "I did. The first week you got here." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he just turned and walked out. As the door closed behind him, I felt, not triumphant, not vengeful, just done. The chapter was finally shut, and this time, I was the one who decided when to close it. What I did not expect was what happened 3 days later. 3 days later, I was leaving the office late, the kind of quiet hour when the building feels half asleep. I stepped into the parking garage and saw a familiar figure leaning against a car I did not recognize. Brad. For a moment, I thought he was there to argue, to try and salvage something. But when he looked up, there was no fight in his eyes, just that tired, hollow expression of someone who finally saw the size of the hole they had dug. He said he wanted to thank me. The words sounded strange coming from him, like they did not quite fit. "For giving me a shot here," he added, "even after everything." I did not say anything, just waited. He glanced away, jaw tightening. I thought getting ahead was about being the smartest guy in the room, making sure everyone knew it. I never realized the smartest guy is usually the one making sure everyone else gets seen, too. It was not an apology, not fully, but it was as close as I was ever going to get. I nodded once. "Take care of yourself, Brad." He gave a short nod back, then got into his car and drove off. No handshake, no promise to keep in touch. Just gone. As I stood there in the quiet garage, I thought about all those late nights years ago. Two guys chasing the same dream, splitting every win 50-50. I had lost a friend back then, but he had lost more. Not just the promotion, not just the job. He had lost the one person who would have gone to the mat for him without question. And that kind of loss, you do not replace it. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove out into the night, finally feeling like the story was over. Not a victory, not revenge, just closure. The road ahead was mine.